Welcome back to Archaeology After Dark, everybody. I am, of course, your host, Daniel Rhodes. My guest today is Jeremy Ellis. Jeremy, thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited about this opportunity to talk about Clotilda, the Clotilda Descendants Association, Africa Town, and address any questions that you may have for me.
So, before we get started, tell us a little bit about yourself and what your group does.
Sure. So a little bit about myself. My name is Jeremy Ellis. I am the current president of the Clotilda Descendants Association, but I am also a direct descendant of Kupoli and Rose Allen, who were two of the enslaved Africans aboard Clotilda. And so ever since I can remember, my family has been on the front lines trying to essentially tell this story. And so my grandmother, Beatrice Ellis, was the original president of the Africa Town Direct Descendants of the Clotilda, Inc., which was founded in 1984. And then after her passing around May of 2011, that organization kind of wasn't as visible. And then this organization, the Clotilda Descendants Association, was founded in 2018. And I am now the current president of this organization.
So, my first question is the wreck of the Clotilda has been officially excavated and parts of it have been removed for display. What does this mean to the Descendants group from your point of view?
It means a lot. It confirms what descendants of the 110 knew, that a crime was committed in July of 1860 by co-conspirators Timothy Mayer and William Foster. And for years, we've known that this story was something that took place. We just never had the evidence. And so what Ben Raines was able to do, and as well as the Alabama Historical Commission, alongside its partners, them being able to find artifacts and identify, not discover. I learned that Professor Delgado says that they identified the ship, but for them to identify Clotilda and actually bring those artifacts up to life just proves what descendants knew and confirms that what took place around July the 8th, 1860 was definitely a true story and a crime was committed. So it means a lot.
It's not just a story anymore. You actually have something concrete to put the story into, like, bring it into the light so people know that it really happened. Like, this crime actually was committed, and now you have something that you can show people to say that it actually did, in fact, happen.
Absolutely. And the work that the Alabama Historical Commission has done in conjunction with their partners just means a lot. Just working directly with Stacy Harthorne and James Delgado, as well as Kamal Siddiqui, who all have just been partners with my organization, the Clotilda Descendants Association, but also just the Africa Town community, keeping us informed on their explorations, what they're learning, what they're finding out about the Clotilda, but doing that with what I call white gloves treatment, understanding that this is a story about our ancestors. This is a story about those 110 enslaved Africans aboard that Clotilda. The ship is just the vehicle that was used to commit a crime. And so I think that Alabama Historical Commission and all of the archaeologists that have participated in this event have been mindful of that. And they've treated this story very delicately, as well as educated us on what they're finding out and what they're learning. And I can't say enough thank yous and express enough gratitude for what they've been able to do, as well as how they've informed my organization as well as the community. We have evidence. We have the physical evidence of Clotilda. And another thing that's so significant, those artifacts, a few of those artifacts will also be a part of the Heritage House. The Heritage House is something that is going to open up on this year, July the 8th, in honor of the landing event that the Clotilda Descendants Association does every year to honor our ancestors. But those artifacts are actually going to be going to be a part of the Clotilda exhibit at the Heritage House down in Mobile, Alabama.
Yeah, and that's something I try to stress on this program is that we as archaeologists, historians, scientists, we need to do more to relate to the community, and us working on something like the Clotilda and showing people that this actually happened, I think personally is a step in the right direction.
Absolutely. I think the model that Stacy and Jim have followed, just with their transparency, um, being upfront, overly communicating, scheduling town halls with the community, keeping us informed on their findings, sharing the report. So outwardly, once the report, I remember actually reading that report. It's a very long report, but the work and the details of what they've learned, and just being intentional about, hey, making certain that before anything is released, sharing that with my organization, Clotilda Descendants Association, but also Africatown residents and Africatown leaders about what they've learned and what's possible, etc. So to me, the way that this group has partnered with the community, um, in my opinion, if it's not a model, it definitely should be a model for how archaeologists move forward with such with topics and cases such as Clotilda, where there are so many high emotions involved, because we're at the end of the day, we're talking about lives and people, and we can never forget that that the artifacts that are identified actually tell a story, right? And that story is what we need to always remember, the story that's being told. And most times that story is about those people.
Yeah. So again, this is something that I really try to stress on this program is that, when people go out into the community, we're, not dictating what the history should be. We're telling them what we found and then writing the narrative around it. You can't just make up history as you go, as many people have tried throughout the ages. You can't just erase history when you have something tangible to prove it with.
And that's important. And I don't want to go down that rabbit hole of what's just taking place politically and geopolitical in the current climate, but history is history. Facts are facts. And what you all do and your ability to identify those artifacts and allow those artifacts to tell the story is important. Specifically in the case of my ancestors, the Clotilda is there. I think that if you read the report and if you talk to Jim Delgado, he talks about how they did everything to try to disprove that this was Clotilda. But at the end of the day, his words were, if it walks like a duck and talks like a duck, it's a duck. And so they were able to confirm that what they identified was Clotilda, and that tells the story, right? That is a factual, and what took place is factual. So it's important, and the work that you all do is extremely important because they tell the narrative of what took place back in 1860, and kind of that illegal trip for Clotilda and bringing back 110 enslaved Africans. That's American history and that's world history.
So, what was your initial reaction to when somebody, I assume, emailed you or came to you and said, "We found the Clotilda," or "We think we found it"?
Wow, that was my initial reaction. You just got it real time. I had the privilege of interviewing uh, um, Delgado, Professor Dr. Delgado, Jim Delgado, and he essentially walked me through the process of how they were able to confirm that it was Clotilda, and essentially broke news on one of the interviews that I did with him. And it was just all just mesmerizing. It was a wow moment for me, but it was confirming something that we had always knew, but now we had the actual artifacts to prove it. So it was an amazing moment. It's a historical moment, and we're in a time, because I believe that timing is everything, where this story has to be told, and that's what the Heritage House, that's what other descendants are doing. We are telling this story, and we're allowing the artifacts to support us in telling the story of our ancestors.
Yeah, and that's a professor I had a few years ago told me this, and I think about it, just about every day now. He says if you're studying history and it isn't making you uncomfortable, then you're looking at the wrong history.
He's a very smart. That's a very true statement. These are facts, and we're going to learn more, right? Especially around the exploration that took place in May of 2022. Historical Commission, Alabama Historical Commission commissioned a 10-day exploration. And there are some stories that I was able to capture with Kamal Sadiq and, excuse me, and Professor Delgado about what they learned even from this past exploration. For example, Kamal tells the story of actually touching the cargo hold and the emotions that came from touching that cargo hold. And then uh, Jim Delgado tells the story and was essentially walking me through how my ancestors would have essentially been stacked side by side in the cargo hold. So those artifacts are so important because they're telling the brutal truth of what that voyage was like for those 110. And imagine if had we not found that, had we not been able to identify Clotilda and have these artifacts, these are things we would never know. Um, Another thing is, so for example, the National Geographic is working with uh, University of West Carolina to determine if there's human DNA that exists in the cargo hold and from the artifacts that were captured from Clotilda. So a lot is happening. We're learning a lot from this exploration. I'm excited. The more and the more they're able to continue their analysis of this past exploration, I'm excited for future explorations because they're going to be able to go back, hopefully, and get more intel and tell us more stories about what that voyage would have been like uh, in July of 1860.
Yeah, from what I've been hearing about the work that, the Historical Commission and other people are planning to do is they have an extensive plan. Like they have enough research material to keep going for at least another couple of years to learn more about the Clotilda and the evidence surrounding it. So, what is the next step for the Descendants group now that all this work has been done?
Well, we're excited. We want to see the report. So the report hasn't been released yet, and hopefully that will be released in the next few weeks or months, and we can kind of get a clear understanding of kind of their analysis and what they learned from this past May exploration. But in addition, I mentioned this earlier, but we are looking forward to the opening of the Heritage House. The Heritage House is going to be, it's in Africa Town, and the Mobile County Commissioner, who I can't say enough about, Commissioner Lutgood, as well as the History Museum of Mobile by Meg Fowler, they essentially built, Commissioner Lutgood and her team have built the Heritage House, and Meg Fowler and her team have developed the Clotilda exhibit, and that's going to open in July July the 8th, around the Clotilda Descendants Association landing event. But what I'm excited about is this is going to be a 3-day event starting July the 6th. And on July the 6th, they're going to allow descendants to go and see the artifacts and see the exhibit. But on July the 7th, they're going to do a ribbon cutting ceremony. And on July the 8th, they're going to open it up to the public. And so anyone that's interested, it's welcome down to Mobile, Alabama, Africa Town, USA, to come and visit Heritage House, see these artifacts that have been pulled up from Clotilda, get a chance to see and hear our ancestors' story, the story of the 110 that's going to tell the story of their life pre USA, pre coming over, and how they were soldiers and marketers and in the royal family, and just everything that they did prior to coming over to on this illegal voyage. But then it's also going to talk about their time as enslaved for 5 years. But then we get to the part where they were resilient and they voted for the first time. So it's going to tell the full story of my ancestors, as well as talk about Clotilda, the ship, and you'll be able to see those artifacts. So I just want to invite everyone out July 8th to come to it. It's going to be a block party. And we're looking to have rides, hopefully, out to Clotilda. So people that are interested in going out to that location and that site can definitely get an opportunity to experience that as well.
Honestly, that sounds like a very educational and informative 3 days that y'all have planned. It's busy on top of all that, but it sounds really exciting.
It's going to be a good time because we envision Heritage House. So, and this is actually just came out, the National Geographic UK edition said that this is the #1 most anticipated opening and tourism spot in the world, the Heritage House here in Alabama, in the state of Alabama. So we envision tourism to skyrocket for people wanting to come down and see the Heritage House, go through the exhibit, and learn about my ancestors. And so we're trying to get as many people to come down. We want students to come down. Teachers, if you're watching this, bring your students so that they can kind of see this and experience this. Clotilda is the very last known slave ship to bring enslaved Africans. So this is a huge deal and going to be a great opportunity to boost tourism in Africa Town.
Yeah, and this story as a whole, the Clotilda, all the work that's been done into it, for those of you outside of the state of Alabama, this has been a huge manpower research project in the state of Alabama, I'd say for at least the past 3 years.
Oh, absolutely. I would even say I'm looking over here at my other screen because I just wrote a recommendation letter for Historical Commission, and it's been over 5 years. That's what my letter says. So they've been in regards to Clotilda, and their involvement has been over the past 5 years.
Yeah, I remember
A lot
somebody.
of work has gone. A lot of work has gone into this from a lot of people, and we've learned a lot about just this particular ship. But more importantly, we've learned a lot about what that experience was like for the 110.
Yeah, I remember reading an article. This was, I think, right before COVID was when the initial investigation started, and I wasn't sure if COVID had slowed down the progress or not, but people seem to be going full speed on it now.
This was 2018, actually. So this was actually 2018 when they first started looking, and confirmation. I actually found out in May of 2019 that this was Clotilda. So that's how far back we're talking about, just the involvement of the Alabama Historical Commission and their partners. Let me ask you this. I'm kind of curious to you. What are your peers saying? And you're a grad student now, and you are deeply involved in archaeology. What are your peers saying about this story?
Well,
Do y'all talk about it, and do you talk about it in any of your classes?
on occasion, we do talk about it, especially in terms of community relations and history, because my specialization is public history. So, what we want to do with that is we want to take historic information and find new and creative ways to showcase history so that people can not only see it, but learn lessons from it.
And this is the perfect, and this is the perfect case study for that, because what other way to learn about the transatlantic slave trade, the crime that was committed, and the attempt to hide the evidence by sinking and setting it on fire, right? So that happened. We know that there were 110 enslaved Africans aboard. And here's the other thing about this story that's so unique. From my knowledge, this is the only story where we actually have written documentation from both the co-conspirator, William Foster's diary, who was the captain of the ship, as well as we have video footage and of Cujo Lewis, who was actually one of the 110 enslaved on the ship. We have in Bear Coon and Zora Neale Hurston's interview. So there's so much rich history in this story. It's undeniable that this happened, and we're only learning more because of the work that Ben Raines and other archaeologists have done in their efforts to explore Clotilda in the site. We're only going to learn more, and I'm excited because like for example, the DNA that Western Carolina is doing, Dr. Frankie West. I am sitting on my hand on my hands, just waiting to hear back from her, because she's actually doing the work now. Because I want to know if there's ancient DNA that still exists, right? And that's just going to be more telling and we're going to learn more about my ancestors specifically. So there's just so much, and the work that the archaeologists are doing is just so important.
Yeah, and that's another thing I can point out is, even in the past few decades, that kind of scientific research wasn't even really possible. It was still, bottom line, we get what we can out of it. Now we can actually trace it to like an exact individual now.
Oh, it's just so much we can do now. So, and like you just so let me ask you this then, from the from the history perspective, do what do as a student, what would you focus on in telling this story?
Um, well, the thing about telling a story is I would want to make sure that I'm, not telling someone their history. I would want to put it in a narrative to where everyone can relate to it. Like people understand that these are the facts, this is what happened, and we can actually prove it so that people won't try to deny it at some point, say, oh, y'all don't have any, real evidence to prove it.
And that's exactly what that report that Jim and his team what they wrote up. That's exactly what they did, and I would anticipate the report that they're drafting now is going to do the same thing, where they can point to metrics and facts. And I think that when you stick to the facts as they've done, it tells the story itself.
Yeah, when you present facts, you want to make sure that that's all you're presenting are the facts. There's no denial or anything to it. It is just the facts, the evidence, and what we have to show with those facts and evidence.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's true. That's true.
Well, Jeremy, this has been a great conversation. We're about to sign off for the day. You got any last minute things you want to throw in there?
Well, sure. So first off, Daniel, I appreciate you bringing this story to the forefront and to the light with your audience. Any chance I get to talk about my ancestors, talk about the Clotilda Descendants Association, or even Heritage House Africa Town, I look forward to that. So thank you for the opportunity to meet with. It's not often that I get to talk to archaeologists and those in that network. Number two is come down and visit. We want you all, like I mentioned, this is one of the most anticipated openings in the world and in the state of Alabama. So if you can come down to Mobile the weekend of July the 8th, it's the grand opening of the Heritage House. You get an opportunity to see these artifacts and even get an opportunity for those interested to go out to the actual Clotilda site. That's something that we have in the works. So come down, visit us, go to our website, www.theclotildastory, www.theclotildastory.com. You'll be able to find out everything about our organization, what we stand for, as well as being informed about the upcoming July the 8th event. So I just welcome and invite everyone out. So thank you so much, Daniel.
Thank you. All right. See you next time, everybody.
See you next time. Thank you all.